Hello traders, good day to you all. Today it is the 8th of November 2013 and this is a daily market review regarding the current market status and the announcements that we're expecting to see later on this trading session. First of all, yesterday I said that we will have an enormous amount of movement because of the European Central Bank press conference and because of the minimum bid rate. The minimum bid rate is basically what is the interest rate that the bank itself is receiving from using the currency. As you can see, they've lowered the interest rate with a 0.25. Okay, so we understand from that that it will be cheaper to use a currency. We saw that the euro dropped down significantly yesterday, lost a lot of strength, and in this case, I'd like to talk about the cycle that we were witnessing yesterday. First of all, up until the announcement itself, we did not receive a lot of movement in the market. Low liquidity, a lot of traders expecting to see large movement, and they weren't really certain with the position. So all traders waited outside of the market. Just to give you an example, what happened yesterday, we saw that the DAX, the CAC, and other indices from Europe just fluctuated around the same levels. They did not gain a lot of strength and just stayed put. We will see that on the chart as well. When the announcement came out regarding the minimum bid rate, we saw the indices in Europe climbing up 1 or 2%, which is an enormous movement, and eventually at the end of the European session we saw that dropping down. Now what actually happened yesterday is that once the euro lost strength in the market, it had to express the weakness in front of other currencies. The euro caused the dollar to gain an enormous amount of strength, and we've talked about that several times. Whenever the dollar is gaining strength, then our expectation is that the US market will fall down. Every time that the dollar is gaining strength, the market itself is crushing, especially with the enormous perspective that we saw yesterday. Just to give you a small indication, the Nasdaq yesterday dropped down almost 2%, 1.9%, and again that's an enormous amount. The S&P 500, the Dow Jones also fell down significantly, and today we will have another huge movement in the market. This is exactly why we're talking about the current market status. As you can see, we didn't have a lot of announcements that had a lot of effect earlier, but right now we're approaching 1:30 GMT time announcement regarding the Canadian dollar unemployment rate and employment change, and regarding the US dollar, the non-farm employment change and unemployment rate. Usually the non-farm payroll, the NFP, is pronounced at the first Friday of each month. Obviously it was delayed. Okay, it's the release date delayed by 7 days due to the US government shutdown that we had last month. So all the ingredients are combined and pressuring today's situation in the market. Now again, I'm always saying that binary option trading is not buying an asset for long-term investment. It's just buying an asset whenever it looks like a good investment for the next half an hour, 15 minutes, 1 hour, and that is our privilege. We need to understand how to use this information in order for us to make a profit. So beside the announcements that we see over here, the combination between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar, we've got several other announcements. The US market will deliver another announcement at 2:55, and at 8:30 we've got another announcement. Mr. Bernanke will speak and will again change the course of the market. We've got two major players in the markets. The first one is Mr. Draghi from the European Central Bank, and he talked yesterday, giving some sort of relief to weaker countries in the European section. And today we've got Bernanke, and there's a lot of anticipation for his speech. A lot of traders for the entire year, I'm talking about 11 months, they believe that the reaction of the federal bank in the United States is a mistake. Obviously, they're basically covering the problematic situation in the market by pushing more funds into the market. And we know that eventually that won't really help the market, because eventually the federal bank will have to lower the amount of support to the market. They can't just push more and more funds into the market. It doesn't work that way. And eventually the United States will have to deal with the debt issue that they just postponed from the beginning of the year. I've talked about that before. My assumption is that 2014 we will see a huge crisis all around the world, and this is, I believe, this is the beginning of that specific crisis. We can see fractals of different ingredients in the economy starting to reveal themselves, and we saw that yesterday in Europe. We will see that we saw that yesterday in the United States. We saw the effect on the Asian market as well. All markets expressed weakness, terrible weakness. I'm talking about percentage, 1% over here, 2% over there, an enormous amount of drop down. Just to give you a large perspective, again, we will deal with the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar in a second, but I just want to focus you on what's going on right now in the market. So let's go and see one chart that displays that error in a very accurate formation. This is the Nikkei. This is the Nikkei. We know that the Nikkei has a straight correlation to the Japanese yen. Whenever the Japanese yen is gaining strength, meaning all currencies are falling in front of the Japanese yen, then the Nikkei will drop down. A stronger Japanese yen is a weaker Nikkei, a weaker economy in Japan. We see that at May we had an enormous drop down. In terms of structure, that drop down, first of all, let me show you the larger image. Okay, we can see that the economy climbed up significantly, and basically that is the effect of the same reaction. In Japan, they've decided to push more funds into the market, lowering the value of the Japanese yen and adding more power to the economy itself. From this peak from here, we can say that the market dropped down in an A wave, a beginning of a corrective pattern. From that moment, it's fluctuating in a B wave, in a triangle formation. And my expectation is that we will see another breakdown over here that will begin the crisis that I'm talking about. I've been talking about that crisis that I'm expecting to see on 2014 for the last month or even more than that. So that is my expectation from the Nikkei, and that will give the shot of the beginning for the crisis that we're expecting to see. Now, how can we use this information today on the current market status for today's announcement? That's what we're basically here for. So let's go back again to the announcement itself. We've got a great combination between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. At the same time, we will pronounce, the market will pronounce the indication for all the currencies, for both currencies. And in this case, I'd like to talk about strength and weakness and the way that we can use this information. So first of all, let's go back to the charts. I'm going to the Japanese yen indication, just as I'm doing before every session. But today it is the most important thing that we can do to differ between strong currencies and weak currencies. What I'm going to do, I'm going to build a scale of strong currency and weak currency. In this case, let's first organize the currencies according to strength and weakness. So we can say that the Japanese yen is the strongest currency because all currencies are weaker than the 50 level. So the Japanese yen is the stronger, again, implying that there's a huge crisis up ahead. 46 seems to be the highest currencies. Let me just arrange that very quickly. The pound, the dollar, and the Australian dollar are the strongest after the Japanese yen. After that, 45 and 45 and 44, 44. Okay, so from this image we can say that generally we don't have liquidity, and that's logical because traders are waiting for the announcement to be delivered. At the moment there's no reason to trade the market unless there's a good chance of a trade using the Japanese yen strength. The Canadian dollar seems to be the weakest currency at the moment. The euro is keeping the same perspective as yesterday because of the weakness that it was expressing. The Swiss franc, together with the euro, lost a lot of strength yesterday at the moment that we had an announcement from the European Central Bank. And the pound, it was one of the strongest currencies, and it's still keeping the same level in front of other currencies besides the Japanese yen. The dollar itself is among the strongest currencies, and the Australian dollar is among the strongest currencies as well. Whenever the New Zealand and the Australian dollar aren't at the same level, then I can say that the market is not organized or in a corrective pattern, and that's what we have right now. Now, let's just organize the currencies according to strength and weakness. So the Australian dollar, the US dollar, the pound, after that we've got the New Zealand, the Swiss franc, the euro, and the Canadian dollar. So this is the current level in the market. Obviously, the Japanese yen is way stronger than everyone. Now we can say that the dollar, the Australian dollar, and the Japanese yen are among the strongest currencies in the market. And we can say that the Swiss franc, the euro, and the Canadian dollar are the weakest currencies at the moment in the market. So that's the scale that we will pay attention to. And here I'd like to express what kind of variety opportunities we will have once the announcement will be delivered. We've got three situations regarding the current market status. The first situation will be that the Canadian dollar will receive a general good announcement that will add strength to the Canadian dollar, and that will help us take trades toward a stronger Canadian dollar in the market. A second, and it depends on the combination with the US dollar. If the Canadian dollar and the US dollar both will receive good announcements, then they will affect the market. They will climb up in the scale of strength and weakness. And that is a situation where I'm not trading the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar. I'm trading other currencies in front of these two currencies. For example, if both currencies will receive good announcement, then I will express the strength of the Canadian dollar and the US dollar in front of the Swiss franc and the euro, which are the weakest currencies in the market. On the other hand, if we will receive bad announcement on the Canadian dollar and bad announcement on the US dollar, then we will express that weakness of both currencies in front of the Japanese yen and the Australian dollar. Obviously the dollar itself, if it will lose strength, then we will see it dropping down and joining the weaker currencies perspective. And the better situation that we can expect to see, I would definitely rather that that will happen, is that one currency, such as the Canadian dollar, will receive bad announcement and the US dollar will receive good announcement, or the other way around. Now, if we would like to trade the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar, the chart of the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar is the US dollar in front of the CAD. So if the Canadian dollar will receive bad announcement and the US dollar will receive good announcement, that's an instant uptrend movement. So you should take this chart immediately as the announcement is expressed. If it will be the other way around, the Canadian dollar will receive good announcement and the US dollar will receive bad announcement, then a downtrend will be spiking lower significantly, and that would be a great trade for a downtrend. Again, we've covered all three scenarios. The first one is that both will receive good announcement, and we know how to express that in front of the weaker currencies. The second one is receiving bad announcement, so we will be able to express the weakness of the Canadian dollar and the US dollar in front of strong currencies. And the third option is that one of them will express weakness and the other one will express strength, and then the combination between them, because we've got a specific announcement released at the same time, we will be able to trade the Canadian dollar in front of the US dollar toward the direction. Very easy trade. Now, how can we know if the Canadian dollar receives a good announcement or the dollar will receive bad announcement? The only thing that we need to look at is over here. Okay, all four announcements, we've got red colors or green colors. The indication, whether it's green, that's good for the currency, whether it's red, that's bad for the currency. A very easy perspective, a very easy trade to participate in. Now let's go to the charts and start to figure out, according to structure, what is a logical reaction of the currencies. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the dollar index. I've talked about this long-term drop down that we had. We had an announcement from Bernanke over here and another announcement from Bernanke over here. You can see how effective the announcements on the market. This is a dollar index chart. It indicates a general strength of the dollar in the market, the average strength. Over here we can see that the dollar lost a lot of strength. Over here we can see that the dollar gained a lot of strength. The idea is, the important issue is that we've fluctuated around the same level, bouncing on the same trend line, and just 2 days ago we've crossed this trend line, meaning that there's a great deal of potential for a stronger dollar in the market. Here yesterday I've stated that my expectation is that the dollar will gain strength as an outcome of the announcement from the European area. And indeed we had an enormous climb on the dollar, and I said that that uptrend will affect the gold, will drop the gold. In order for me to analyze this chart, I will go to a low time frame. In this case, my expectation from this chart, from the average strength of the dollar, is that because we had an impulse movement and a drop down in an A and a B pattern, I'm expecting a C wave to drop down, and after that I'm expecting an enormous climb up. That is my expectation, that is my plan. Again, announcements will be delivered through the calendar and we will be able to follow the expression of the announcement. At the moment it seems like the dollar needs to add another downtrend movement before we will climb up. Yesterday I've talked about the gold, and I said that was the perspective yesterday. I said that the gold, because it gave us an impulse movement dropping down and an A, a B and a C wave, I said that my expectation will be that the gold should climb a bit more and then it will drop down. Eventually, when the announcement came up, indeed we've climbed higher and dropped down significantly. Again, the gold is showing the same perspective, just the opposite of the dollar index. This is the first impulse wave dropping down. We've got an A, a B, and a C pattern should climb up a bit more. And when the announcement will be delivered, my assumption is that we will see an additional drop down. How can we know when to join the gold trade? A trend line below the corrective pattern will indicate whether we're continuing lower or bouncing higher. At the minute this chart will fall down below the trend line, I will participate in a gold option for a put option. You can take that for half an hour, for 1 hour, depends on what we've got on the system. You can use the on-demand instrument on our system, on our platform, taking that for a put option. That will be a great trade. Once it will cross the trend line, it will continue the movement significantly for a very long distance, at least until the 1,300, and I know that it doesn't seem like a long distance, but that's a huge distance. It's almost 1% of a drop down. In terms of gold, that's an enormous movement. Again, 15-minute chart, that's how it looks like. A 5-minute chart, you can see that indeed we've got a lot of time bouncing on the same trend line. Again, I will expect to see a bit more uptrend before we will crash down, but that will happen before the announcement. Okay, we've got enough time. That's a 5-minute chart. A very important indication we will receive from the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar. Let's go and see that. Again, the combination between two announcements at the same time is always providing a good potential to trade. Let me look at the larger structure. That's an amazing thing. As you can see, an impulse movement of an uptrend showing us that the dollar is stronger in this aspect during that time frame from the 23rd until the 21st, 31. And here we've had an A dropping down, we've got a B climbing up, and at the moment, unfortunately, regarding the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar, I'm expecting the dollar to drop down in front of it just because of the structure. So again, according to the Elliott wave analysis, we will receive bad announcement on the dollar and good announcement on the Canadian dollar. It doesn't seem like an organized structure that reflects the same idea that I had through all the other charts, and this is why I feel a bit worried about this chart specifically, whether to trade on it or not. The only way that I will be able to trade on it will be, in order for me to do that, I will need the announcement itself to express. Basically, a cross below this trend line will indicate that the Canadian dollar is stronger than the US dollar, and that will allow us to participate in a trade for a put option. It doesn't go correlated with other aspects that I have in the market. This is why I believe that the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar will be a very difficult trade to trade on. Maybe we'll receive good announcement on both currencies, and this is why the structure doesn't fit other potential trades that I can see on other charts. Let's go over a variety of assets and try to figure out what is the potential over there. Euro versus the Australian dollar. It seems like the euro should lose more strength than the Australian dollar will gain strength. A great trade is up ahead on this chart. I remind you, just because we will receive an announcement on the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar, that doesn't mean that the only trade that we can take is in front of the dollar and the Canadian dollar, or using the strength of the dollar and the strength of the Canadian dollar, or weakness. It doesn't mean that at all. As at the minute that we will receive liquidity to the market expressing the announcement regarding the US dollar and the Canadian dollar, we will add an enormous amount of liquidity to the market. So even if the announcement is expressed on the dollar and the Canadian dollar, it doesn't mean that other currencies we won't be able to trade on them. For example, we saw that the Australian dollar is among the strongest currencies and the euro is among the weakest currencies. So we know that at the moment the announcement will drop its heavy weight to the market, the liquidity. Then this will be expressed in front of this chart, the euro, in front of the Australian dollar as well. Basically, to tell you the truth, I believe that it will eventually cross the trend line and will give us a great rate for a put option over here, regardless of what we've got coming up from the US market and the Canadian market. So that will even be a better choice than other currencies. Euro in front of the Australian dollar, that will be a great trade. We will cross this trend line and we will have a signal for a put option over here. That will be a great trade for a downtrend for a put option. Australian dollar versus the US dollar. I think that the Australian dollar is among the strongest currencies, and if the dollar will gain strength, then there's no reason to express that in front of the US dollar, in front of the Australian dollar. I would leave this asset alone. A better probability is the euro versus the Australian dollar. The pound in front of the Japanese yen. I think that we will receive another downtrend movement on all the Japanese yen currencies. But in order for us to do that, we've got, in terms of structure, again, we've got an impulse movement dropping down. We've got an A climbing up, a B dropping down, and a C will climb up as well. And then we will have the drop down. It's a very interesting image to look at the Japanese currencies. Whenever we've got an announcement that delivers a lot of liquidity, we can see the image of the current market movement through this chart in a very accurate and professional way. Immediately we see exactly what's going on, and in this case I'd like to talk about what we had yesterday, because that's a great that's just a great way to understand how to react to announcements. So I'm pushing the fund, I'm pulling the charts toward the announcement that we had yesterday, so that they will all reflect approximately the same movement that we had. At the moment that we had the announcement yesterday, it was here on this chart. You can see that the dollar gained an enormous amount of strength in front of the Japanese yen. The pound gained an enormous amount of strength at the beginning. The New Zealand gained a bit of strength at the time when the announcement was expressed from the European area. The Australian dollar gained small amounts of strength, and not like the perspective that we've got over here, the euro and the Swiss franc lost an enormous amount of strength immediately. This is how, from looking at this image, I know what's going on in the market. I knew at the moment that the announcement was expressed, I knew exactly where money is driven from and pulled toward. In this case, the euro and the Swiss franc lost an enormous amount of strength instantly, while other currencies, Australian dollar, dollar, pound, New Zealand, and the Canadian dollar gained strength at the beginning. So that rock that was thrown into the lake of currencies affected currencies immediately, and the only way that I could have participated in a trade was looking at this image, because instantly, once the announcement was expressed, I knew that we've got great opportunity to express the strength of the Australian dollar, dollar, pound, New Zealand, and the Canadian dollar in front of the euro and Swiss franc, which are expressing weakness. That is the way to deal with announcements. And I'm sure that most of you already have the Japanese indication. You gotta follow that when the announcement will be delivered. I would even say that you don't need to look at the calendar. The calendar may only confuse you sometimes. Once the calendar will pronounce that or pronounce that, it has no meaning. We will see the effect in front of this index. Okay? So immediately you'll receive the announcement's expression in front of different currencies over here, and a stronger currency, meaning an uptrend on one chart, in front of the weak currency, meaning a downtrend on one chart of currencies in front of the Japanese yen, will send you straight to the most probability and the most profitable, smooth, clean movement that you can ask for from the current market status. That completes the session. I hope that you've received enough information to deal with announcements like that. We will have several more announcements like that in the future. I'm sure that for those of you who worry about the funds, you can stay outside of the market, wait for the announcement, see how it's reacting, then understanding how to combine all the information together. For those of you who already seen my trading sessions and know how I'm reacting to the market and know how to use the instruments, today we've got a golden opportunity. I can tell you that I can just look for a correlation between the current market's potential and other fields. It's basically like surfing in a very quiet water and like surfing on huge waves in Hawaii. That's what we had yesterday, huge waves, and it was very easy to drive to invest your funds in a very accurate position. And that's what we're going to have today. Two situations. The first one is the announcement of the dollar in front of the Canadian dollar at the same time, and the second one is the announcement from Bernanke later on this trading session. From here, from Opteck, I'd like to wish you all the best with your trades. For those of you who are connected to my Skype, you can send me potential trade, ask me. I will answer if it's logical to trade toward the direction that you want to trade, and I will help you as much as I can. Have a pleasant day, all the best, and bye-bye.